Hey, how you doing? Hey,
Good.
nice to see you.
I'm so pleased to be able to talk to you. It's a bit surreal. I'm a fan of yours, and I'm a big fan of yours, and I'm a little nervous, but I'm going to seize this opportunity.
Well,
First,
likewise, I'm really honored to be with you. I remember when, especially when you're a mayor from Indiana in your 30s, you think you're getting somewhere with your presidential campaign, but you're not sure. And you turn on the TV and Paul Rudd's playing you on SNL. That's when you feel like you're really getting somewhere. So,
well, thank you for saying that. I apologize. I thought, I bet he's going to see this, and I'm not so sure this is such a great representation. It isn't. I kept thinking, what are your characteristics? I mean, you roll up your sleeves, but outside of that, I didn't know what to do.
yeah, I was just flattered to have you in the role. So everything else was gravy.
Well, I appreciate that, and to be able to talk to you is very cool. Do I call you Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pete?
Pete's fine.
Pete. Okay. Well, please call me Paul.
Sounds good.
Pete. One of these things that we routinely hear every election cycle is that this is the most important election of our lives. And while I think that is true, it's pretty understandable that people are skeptical if they hear that over and over again.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if you could explain why you think this really is the most important election.
Yeah. Well, the way I see it, we're coming into the most important decade of our lives, where a bunch of decisions that will be made in a short amount of time that will affect how life unfolds for the rest of our lives. You think about what's going on with our climate. Scientists tell us we've got until about 2030, our last chance to really stop the worst permanent effects. But for any of that to happen by 2030, we got to be underway like yesterday. And that's only going to happen if we elect a president who believes in climate change. You look at the racial injustice in this country, and probably the number one thing that's threatened to swallow the whole American project over the years, especially during the Civil War, but not only during the Civil War, is white nationalism and white supremacy, and it's rearing its head right now. I really think these years coming up ahead of us are either when we beat it down for good, or when it really does devour the potential of America. So whether we're talking about beating the pandemic or economic justice, racial justice, climate change, so many things are about to happen. So many decisions are about to be made that will kind of get locked in to set up the future of our lives. It so matters who's in charge. And at this kind of tender moment in American history, I want to make sure it's somebody like Joe Biden and not a guy like Donald Trump, because we know what we're getting with the current president, and we know what the cost would be to 4 more years of that.
Do you remember about a year or two ago, there was that thing of online, people would say, you hear Yanny or do you hear Laurel? People would hear one thing or the other.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you heard Laurel, there was no way anyone was going to convince you that it was saying Yanny. It's like, I hear it with my own ears, and vice versa. And I felt like that was a bit of a metaphor to where we're at politically, that no matter what is presented to us, whatever you believe, the other side is out of touch.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, how do we fix that? Regardless of what happens in this next election, there's going to be a large group of people who are distraught and really upset.
Yeah, I mean, look, some of this is bigger than politics, right? Some of this is how our whole country's come to be divided. But I still think it's part of what's at stake in politics. And, part of what we have a chance right now to do is to get back in touch with our ground truth. I might not view political issues the same way as a neighbor here in Indiana might, but we might have some shared values about how the world's supposed to work, about the importance of decency or empathy or hard work. And of course, I believe those are very much at stake in my support for the Biden-Harris ticket. But they may have a totally different sense of politics. I think a lot's going to depend on having leadership where there's an instinct to call us together. Every mayor's got to learn how to do it. You can't function as mayor if you can't bring people together. And presidents should too. But it's not only going to be up to a president to solve this problem, right? Yes, we've got to elect a president whose instinct is to heal and not to divide. And, I think this could be a season for that, because what I find is way more people than you would think are calling out for that kind of change.
I hope we can kind of fix some of that. with the Supreme Court, and I've just been wondering, when did the Supreme Court just become, when did it become accepted that it's so partisan? I mean, isn't the entire point of the Supreme Court to have just justices that interpret the Constitution that are impartial?
Yeah, I think that's really important. You know, many of the moments that really built the legitimacy of the Supreme Court are moments when it voted in ways or decided cases in ways that people weren't expecting, maybe because they assumed that people would kind of stick to an ideological line. And yet we're seeing more and more of these kind of 5-4 votes. Or 6-3 votes that really do almost make it feel like the court has parties just the way the Senate does, and it's not supposed to. It's one of the reasons I think we ought to look at measures that would make the court a less politicized body over time. But I also think it's why, just like the rest of our politics, I hope that the law and the courts can hold themselves accountable to the most basic element of why any of this matters, which is that it hits our lives. And in my case, I think about healthcare for people in my family that I love. I think about the existence of my marriage and how that was at stake and might unfortunately still be at stake in what's going before the court. So many issues that get talked about in these arcane terms of legal academia. But in the end, it's about our everyday lives, and they're going to go better or they're going to go worse, depending on decisions that are made by politicians and depending on decisions that are made by judges and justices. And I think we've got to hold that in mind. And that's part of what propels my involvement, the knowledge that my life and my family's life, my neighbors' lives will go differently and better, I believe, if we have better leadership. And I'm really moved and glad to see that you're so engaged too. And I wonder what propelled you to do that. You know, it's one thing to be visible the way you are. It's another to decide to take that and use that as a chance to reach people and let people know how important their power is as voters. So what's motivating you to vote this year, but also what's motivating you to ask others to vote too?
Well, there's a lot motivating me to vote. I suppose I've always been a politically minded person. I've always believed in human rights, first and foremost. I just think that everybody should be treated the same. You know, if you're a woman, you should have every opportunity, just as a man, does, or if you're a minority or an immigrant. And I just think that if you believe in human rights, there's really only one way to go here. But I still believe that truth and science and climate change, decency, human rights, kindness, and democracy are all things that are still worth fighting for. And I think that it's important for my kids to see that their mom and dad care.
Yeah.
And I feel this strongly about it that I wanted to speak out. I'm from flyover country too. I grew up in the Midwest, and it's frustrating to see red and blue. It's like you vilify the other side. I certainly know people that are Republicans, and I just think that, like you say, there's common ground. And if we can just talk to each other civilly and maybe come to some conclusions of the way the world should be, that, we should at least try.
Yeah, well, and I think now's our chance, right? I mean, that's why it's so inspiring to see that there's a lot of Republicans and independents coming together with Democrats saying, hey, this isn't my party, but this is, these are things I care about. So I'm glad people are doing that. I'm really glad that you're stepping up and making your voice heard too, because I think it's one of those things that's it's just an all hands on deck moment for all of us who care about where we're headed. The good news is we could come out on the other side of this really proud of what we did together this year. And then we've got a lot of work to do together. That hopefully,
yeah. Then it starts. Well, God willing, we get to that place, because we do have a lot of work ahead of us. Yeah. Well, thank you for everything you do and everything you continue to do. And,
likewise.
And it's been a thrill for me to be able to talk to you today.
Same here. Appreciate it. Take care.